Rigby's Roads, Chapter 8, Come Fly With Me. Wednesday morning, Jack woke up early and headed for work, even though it was his day off. He picked a well-chosen bunch of flowers for Bonnie, covering all the major colors. He checked his email and went over Bonnie's presentation of the Mingus project. She did a great job. It was as good, if not better, than all of the other finished projects he had seen. It was obvious that she was definitely the brains behind all the finished work, even though the others never gave her the credit. Jack stared at the conference room planning board, admiring Bonnie's notes. Is Carl even aware of her work contributions? Bonnie showed up unusually early, as did everyone else. Tompkins stopped dead in his tracks and looked at Jack. What are you doing here? You're on vacation. And why are you dressed like that? Dressed like what? Those jeans and that motorcycle shirt, they're hardly proper attire for the office. Jack reciprocated. It's my day off and I stopped by to check the Mingus project. Why are you wearing those shorts and that shirt? Where's your tie? Tompkins replied, Carl and I are going golfing this afternoon with Morgan and Travosi and a few others. We have a 1:30 tea time and we're taking the rest of the day off. As Tompkins practiced his golf swing, Jack mumbled, brown-noser piece of crap. What was that? Asked Tompkins. Jack remembered Yogi's talk about the Godfather scene and keeping your enemies closer, so he pretended to repeat, So what's your handicap? Then mumbled, as if we all don't know. I'm a 28 and I'm getting better every year. Jack added admiringly, I bet you have some great drives off the tee. Do you lift weights? Tompkins seemed a little confused, off-center, not prepared for his conversational change. Well, I do spend a lot of time working around the yard, getting a good workout. He looked at his arm and flexed it slightly, pretending he wasn't doing it. Jack added, Well, have a great round, and get a few birdies for me. Thanks, Jack. You have a great day, too. Jack took note of what just happened. Wow, that actually worked. He walked down the aisle to Bonnie's desk. She cranked her head sideways and said mockingly, Do you lift weights? He shrugged his shoulders. You can't catch flies with vinegar. Jack's new knowledge of the office team going to play golf gave him an idea, but before he could execute his plan, he had to wait for Bonnie's lead. She needed to say one sentence he could bounce off of to ask his question. He started with, They're all going golfing. Everybody from Gaynor on down to Morgan and Travosi. Almost the whole floor is going. And it's a beautiful day, too, she added. It must be nice to take off and go golfing and close out your work week like that, with Thursday and Friday off, too. There was the lead that Jack was looking for. He smiled and came back with, Well, I'm going for a ride on my Harley. Do you want to go? Her eyes lit up with excitement, and she quickly asked, You have a Harley? I've never been on a motorcycle before, but I can't just take off. He carefully chose his next words, for if he asked why not, it may lead her to respond with answers on why she couldn't or shouldn't go. He assembled a one-sided position for her scrutiny. There are about a half a dozen of them taking the afternoon off and going golfing on a gorgeous day like this. They'll be gone the rest of the day. They're playing 18 holes, and collectively, they're going to drink more beer in one day than you and I could drink in a year. He had cleverly changed the conversation to stop her from giving reasons as why she couldn't go to a recap of the unfair situation. She considered his argument and now looked for a good reason. You know, they do owe me half a day off for coming in on Saturday to help with the end of the month reports. There you go, Jack added approvingly. It'll be great. They'll be out in the hot sun on a golf course and we'll be out on a nice cool ride in the mountains. He had played this conversation perfectly. There was no path leading to a negative response. So? He waited patiently for the response, with raised eyebrows and a big smile. Well, how long of a ride? Have you ever been to Boulder Falls? No. It's maybe an hour and a half back and forth. It's a short ride up the canyon. I don't know. What if... She seemed to be reaching in her mind for what-if scenarios. He quickly interrupted her with, What if you fall down the stairs and break your neck? What if a plane crashes into your house while you're sleeping? What if you have a heart attack? She looked across the aisle and saw Sherry nodding her head with open eyes and a smile that shouted, Go! She looked back at him and grabbed a piece of paper and a pen. Here's my address and phone number. Does 2:30 work for you? It's perfect, Jack replied. Great. I'll see you later. Wait, what should I wear? How about a nice dress? He smiled. She looked confused for a second, then returned his smile with one of her own. No, really. Would shorts be okay? I'd wear long pants. It'll be cooler once we get into the mountains, and it's a little safer. See you at 2:30. Jack went home and washed his motorcycle for the first time. It was clean except for the bugs he collected on his rides. The front forks, headlight, handlebars, and the back of the mirrors were splattered with bugs. He rechecked his bike bag for the necessities. Phone, garage door opener, bottled water, a rag, Kleenex, map, his hat, and he stuffed in the extra helmet. He looked at his watch, 1:45. He didn't have to leave for another 20 minutes, so he picked up a rag and started detailing the bike, wiping off spots that couldn't be seen unless your face was inches from the chrome. He was running different conversations about what he should and should not say to Bonnie. He didn't want to give her the wrong impression, saying stupid things. He merely wanted to help bring her out of her quiet shell and enjoy her company. He rode to her house for what he hoped would not be the last time. He parked his bike in her driveway, rested his helmet on the seat, and quickly covered his helmet hair by putting on his hat. He rang the doorbell and checked out his reflection in the door glass, straightening out his hat crown. She opened the door with the biggest smile he had ever seen her give. "Hi," she said affectionately. "Come on in. I need to change. Have a seat. I'll be right down." She went upstairs, and he checked out the living room. Impeccably clean, uncluttered, simple, smart layout, and fine art. He looked at the pictures of her friends and family on the fridge. He spotted her CD collection on a bookshelf near the TV and wandered over and took note. Garth Brooks, Best of Country 96, Sinatra, Mozart, the Beatles, Alan Jackson, Broadway's Best. She sure liked country music, but her tastes were well-rounded, covering all aspects of music. On a small table, he noticed a big blue candle with melted wax that had dripped down his sides. He heard her coming back down the stairs. This was the first time he saw her without her frumpy clothes. She had on jeans and a t-shirt, and her hair was down instead of pulled back. She was a different person, and she looked great. At work, she always wore multiple layers of clothing, usually a sweater or some kind of secondary top over a blouse. It was like she purposely hid her figure at work to avoid the attention. Jack was nervous. "Don't look at her boobs, don't look," he repeated to himself. Eye level, look at her eyes, he kept thinking. He remembered he still had his clip-on sunglasses over his regular glasses, so she couldn't see his eyes. He reached up and unclipped them and focused his eyes at hers. God, she is gorgeous. His look and smile must have conveyed that message, because she looked back with the same enthusiastic smile. "I'm ready," she smiled, and they walked out the door. They stopped at the bike, and Bonnie noticed her neighbor across the street and the guy next door looking at them. She felt their stares and took it all in. Jack smiled and knew exactly what she was feeling from his own experience with his neighbors. He pulled a second helmet out of the bike bag and helped her lock the strap under her chin. "How does that feel?" "It's heavy." "You'll get used to it. There are a few things you need to know about before we go." Jack was giving her the famous first-time speech. "This foot peg here is right over the exhaust pipes. They are extremely hot." "The foot pegs are hot?" she asked in a teasing way. No, not the foot pegs, the exhaust pipes." He was almost annoyed, but realized she was kidding as she smiled. "This is important. Pay attention," he ordered sternly. She mockingly stood at attention, and he continued. "When your foot is on this foot peg, and if you tip your sneaker forward and down or back and down, they will start melting on the pipes, so you need to be aware of that. Number 2, never get on or off unless I say it's okay. The reason is the bike weighs about 500 pounds, and if you get on and I don't have my feet planted on both sides balancing the bike, we'll tip over. Also, if I'm leaning in on a curve, and you're leaning in the opposite direction, it throws off the balance of the bike. So lean with me. When we are crossing railroad tracks, you can stand up a little bit to take the weight off your butt to absorb the bounce with your legs. Like on a horse? She asked. Yeah, like on a horse. He mounted the bike, and he felt proud. Not only proud of this beautiful machine, but he took pride in the fact that it was a Harley. His Harley, and he was about to give a woman her first ride who had never been on a motorcycle before. He was enjoying this powered trip, giving her instructions and seeing her excitement. Wheels was right. It was an adventure that everybody should experience. As proud as he was at that moment, she became more energized as he started it up and revved the engine. The deep, powerful engine sound as it sat idling was hypnotic and pleasing to her. She looked up and smiled at the neighbors. He planted his feet out on both sides of the bike, steadying it, then turned his head back towards her and nodded, "Okay, get on." She carefully mounted the back seat and paid special attention to getting her feet on the foot pegs. She wiggled into place and could now feel the powerful vibrations of the idling engine. "Oh, I like this," she thought. She put her hands behind her, reaching for the back support, increasing the distance between them. Jack smiled and turned his head to see how she was settling in, and then grabbed her arms and pulled them around to the front of him, just above his waist. "You need to hold on, tight." She readjusted her position on the seat and clasped her hands in front of him and pulled herself closer, leaning her breasts right into his back. "Oh, this is good, really good," he thought. "All set?" "Yes." "Comfortable?" "Yes." "Okay, hold on." She hugged him more tightly, not knowing what to expect next. He revved the engine, pulled in the clutch, clicked it into gear, looked down the street for traffic, and off they went. They rode toward the mountains of Boulder. She enjoyed stopping at the lights because it allowed the cars in the other lanes to stare at them. She was eating that up. It made her feel special. He turned onto Canyon Boulevard and headed west as they followed the mountain stream up the winding road. When they passed other bikers, he gave the various waves to his passing comrades. She picked up on that right away, and although she gave the special Harley wave to a crotch rocket, he was amused with her involvement and being swept up in the excitement. He was happy she was leaning well in the turns, and she made the ride a smooth and easy one to control. He thought she might make the ride harder, heavier, but his first passenger became one with the bike. Very zen-like. The slightly cooler air became noticeable as they passed the first major climbing area along the road. Rock climbers came to that spot because of the multitude of climbing routes, and it was less than 5 minutes from town. Jack hated this road in a car, but on the bike, he loved it. It was a syncopated motion of leaning left, leaning right, sometimes in a pattern that seemed like skiing. It was wonderful. He could feel her re-gripping her arms around him, pulling their bodies even closer together as they became one. He could sense her warmth through the thin t-shirt. She was excited. He was proud. They rode to Boulder Falls, only a few miles from the edge of town. It had its own little turnoff for parking and was a great stopping point for her first ride. He stopped the bike and told her when it was safe to get off. He flipped out the kickstand, dismounted, put the helmets on the seat, and he gently put his hands on her back to guide her across the street when the traffic allowed. There was a bulletin board with notices about the area and the dangers of rock climbing. He pointed to the rock next to the bulletin board. It was a large rock, about 5 feet tall and 7 feet wide, with a large hole in it, like a big donut. He mentioned to her that it seemed like every family that stopped here had their kids go behind the rock and poke their heads through the hole to get their picture taken. He pointed toward the starting stairs of the path and directed, "Let's check out the falls." Surprisingly, she took the lead, and he followed close by. On the steps going down, the moisture in the air from the cascading waterfall was immediately noticeable as it held its mist-like presence in the valley between the two cliffs. Within the first 30 feet, they could already see the falls. It was less than 100 yards from the road, yet so many people just drove by, never exploring this beauty of nature. The waterfall was pleasing to the ears with its roaring white sound. Bonnie seemed mesmerized by the rushing water, in a way similar to a music teacher hearing their student play their instrument perfectly for the first time. It was almost a religious experience for her, being lured in by the falls. She stood there and smiled as if she was the only person in the world. He enjoyed watching Bonnie and was caught up in her experience. She was in another place, another time, and she never said one word. 10 minutes went by before her connection was interrupted by a dog pulling their owner up the path just past them. She turned and looked at him. No words came out, but he could read her lips. "Thank you." He took it to mean, thanks for not only bringing me here, but also for allowing me to take it all in without interruption. He smiled back and nodded, while understanding her full meaning. It was a connection he would never forget, and it surely made a big impression on her. They watched as people came to the fall's edge and sat on the bench at the top of the path. Some were dragging kids, and some kids were dragging parents. It was a peaceful place that made an impact on everyone, each in their own way. He stared at her, seeing the innocent beauty that she possessed, while being reminded of the confidence that she hid deep inside her. After 20 minutes, he looked at her and asked, "Ready?" She nodded, took in a deep, long breath, then turned back away from the falls, and she took a step towards Jack. For a moment, as she approached him, Jack thought she was going to kiss him, but she stepped to the side of him with her eyes focused down on the steep and rocky path. He held out his arm to her to offer her a balancing support, and she took his hand and clasped it as they took a few steps to the more secure and wider pathway. It was magic for a few moments, and then he added, "I fell here once," to offer a reason as to why she should hold his hand. When they reached the road, he gently grabbed her arm and guided her back away from the road's edge and explained, "You can't walk too close to these cars speeding by. It's not safe." When the traffic was clear, he reached for her hand and they crossed the road together. She smiled and enjoyed the gesture and gave him a slight nod, which he interpreted as, "Nice touch." He put his helmet on, mounted the Harley, and handed the other helmet to Bonnie. He pulled the bike backwards from the slanted parking spot and aimed it downhill as the loose gravel played havoc with his footing. He settled his position and nodded for her to mount. "I'm ready. Get on." They both found their comfort spot in the seat, and she resumed her hug around him. This time the embrace seemed to have more meaning, a deeper sense of friendship than before. On the way up, she held on because she was scared, but now she held on because she wanted to be closer, and this was her way of thanking him for this baptizing event she had experienced. The ride back towards town was perfect, with no cars in front of them as they revisited the smooth groove of left, right, left, cadence of turns on the meandering road. He suddenly realized he was driving without his gloves, and he instinctively reached toward his back pocket where he had stuffed them when they stopped. But as he reached for the gloves with his hand, he immediately pulled his hand back to the handlebars and realized she might have taken his action the wrong way. His mind froze for a second, and he knew he had to say something, so he turned his head and offered, "My gloves, I forgot to put them on. Sorry about that." She knew right away of his innocent move. "Do you want me to get them?" "No, I'll wait till we stop." And then they continued their back-and-forth dance with the curves of the road. At the first light back in town, he stood up and took the gloves out of his pocket and put them on. "We'll take the back way home, 52 to 287, and avoid the city traffic." She nodded in agreement, but she didn't want the ride to end. No more words were spoken until they stopped in her driveway, and he planted his feet on both sides, turning off the key, and lifted his face shield and instructed, "It's all right. You can get off now." She dismounted, undid the helmet, and handed it to him, and he packed it away in the bag. He searched for his next words carefully and was afraid to say the wrong thing. Bonnie approached him, and his heart jumped as she came with open arms and gave him a long, big hug and simply said, "Thank you. That was great, and I hope we can do it again." He hugged her back. "Hey, anytime you want." He cranked the bike back up and turned to her. "Pleasant dreams," and drove off, revving up the engine. a little harder through the gears so she could hear him drive off in the distance. Now that was definitely a different road, he thought, as he happily drove home. End Chapter 8.